All right. Welcome everybody to our last summer prep session. It's been a long road coming, but we're finally here. We have a lot on the agenda today for interviewing specifically, and we have a lot of different topics to cover. You can kind of see a brief version or agenda today, but we're going to be talking and having a lot of great discussions around common questions, different types of interviews, building confidence, doing mock interviews, and then also negotiating and leveraging offers. And for the last time, although you'll be able to meet with us plenty when you get to Owen, but we are the Career Management Center team, and I've been working really hard to make this programming for you. And just wanted to show our lovely faces last time before you see us in person. And from the cover letter writing session last week, we had you reflect on your last interview for an internship, job, or master's program. What question did you struggle with the most? This question is going to be used during our activity today. So if you haven't had time to think about this, you can have some time before we get to the activity, but definitely think a bit about what question you struggle with during an interview. And as you can see, we've covered a lot of topics so far in the summer prep session. We'll have a bit of a reflection at the end, but today is our final topic on interviews and beyond. So let's dive in. So this is a sample email that many of you may have seen before, will see as you go through your Owen program, but we're excited for you to start getting interviews soon. However, whenever people get an interview, sometimes it brings a lot of anxiety. You have to schedule an appointment in the next couple of weeks, but this is where a lot of interview prep comes into play. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Zeke to talk a little bit about, once you get that email, what are some common questions you can start preparing?
Yeah, so more than likely, you've already even had some of these questions as you've networked and talked to individuals, but a big question is, tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. So you want to be prepared for that. And we will have some resources and workshops to help you with that pitch coming up this fall. So definitely stay tuned on that. The other things that you want to be prepared for, aside from regular behavioral questions, are why this company, why this role. So think about why you're interested in finance, why you're interested in marketing, analytics, etc. That's going to be really important to kind of create that story and understand what are your motivations and passions around the company and the role. Some typical behavioral questions that we listed here are, how do you problem solve? All of you will likely get that question in some way, shape, or form. So be ready to talk about a time when you've problem solved. So it could be group work that you've done here at Owen. It could be, something that you did in an internship, but think about how you've problem solved and have some examples ready for that particular question. Another great question to be ready for is how you deal with conflict. So that could be dealing with conflict with a manager, with a colleague, with a classmate. Like, it's really showing like your leadership, how you deal with, emotional issues, some tension, and making sure that you can walk through a story that highlights how you get through that and do that successfully. Another way, or another question that you want to be able to answer, is how you collaborate with others. And again, lots of examples. You could have been in a fraternity or sorority. You could have been working on a big group project in an internship, but showcase how you work well with others, what your role is. Do you tend to be the leader? Do you tend to be a follower? And sometimes it's okay to be the follower. We all have to take that role at times, so be prepared to talk about that. Again, research the company and the role. LinkedIn is a great resource for that. A lot of companies on their company page will put out posts, whether they be PR releases or something that is happening culturally within the company. It's really good to stay in the know about those things, and LinkedIn is a great resource, along with their about pages on their official company websites. The last thing I'll say is you want to practice, practice, practice. So whether that's making an appointment with one of the coaches here in the CMC, make sure you're getting some practice with mock interviews. Some people will record themselves with their iPhone or their Android and kind of see like, how are they, presenting themselves virtually. A lot of companies are moving to that platform. Maybe some of you have experienced that, but you need to be really comfortable in this setting, looking at the camera, and also in person.
Thanks so much, Zeke. And I wanted to also ask, based on your experience as both a recruiter and in admissions, what is a question that you think students often struggle with and that they should maybe focus a little bit more on?
So I think the conflict question is really hard for people. So that's one that you really want to think through and make sure that you have a really good example. There is all types of conflict that can happen. And so it could be a disagreement on a strategy. It could be someone's not pulling their weight on a project. So I want you to really think through what that example could be and be ready to talk about it. Because a lot of people struggle and they might think like, I've never dealt with conflict. I don't think that's true. You have dealt with conflict, but you may just have to think outside the box of where did that conflict happen? And that's where extracurriculars, I think, could come in handy. A lot of you I know are leaders, you're involved. If you think through some of those experiences, maybe you had, you know, a fraternity brother, sorority sister going through a tough time and you had to kind of manage that for the entire community. You can think about that. Maybe you had a budgeting issue with one of your clubs that you were involved in. Like, how did you work through that conflict? So there's a lot of ways to think about conflict, but I think that's one that can catch people off guard at times.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zeke.
Yeah.
So next we want to talk a little bit about 1220. I'm going to pass it over to Brooke to talk about the interview database.
Absolutely. Thank you. So if hopefully you all are getting plenty of exposure with 1220, one of the things that is coming up with 1220 that is good to be thinking about is around the start of August, you all are going to get increased access to 1220. So if you take a look at the screenshot we have there, you are probably not going to currently see all of those tabs that you have. You probably have home and profile, but I don't think you have target employers and contacts and research tools. But in just in about a week, you all are going to be getting access to that. And when you get access to that, there are a ton of tools. And I really hope that you spend time looking more into those. In fact, next Thursday at the same time, we're going to have two of the staff that work with, especially with the 1220 system and with employers, and they're going to talk you through a lot of the great things you can do in 1220. So one of the things you're going to access to is this interview database. It's a great tool, and what you can do in this is you can do some searching by past interviews that students have had and they've shared about. So for example, if you go in, you can sort by a lot of different areas, you know, employer, industry, function. So for example, you put in function and consulting, and there's there's one in the screenshot, but there were more that came up. And then if we click forward, you can even see an example of what some of the feedback looks like. You can get a little bit of insight into, you know, the different parts of the interview and really whatever the interviewer wants to share. Sometimes you'll see sample questions that the person encountered. Sometimes you'll see tips of how to really prepare. Now, one caveat with this system is, you know, the whole, you know, garbage in, garbage out. The more information we have in here, the better the data is that you're going to be able to pull. So as you can see on the next slide, I want you to keep this all in mind, and we're talking about this now because please, as you start getting interviews, and I know they're going to be coming up quickly for you all, you can enter them. If you go to the profile, and you can see under profile, you can scroll over that interviews tab, and there's a place you can add either post-graduation, like full-time job interview, or you can add internship interviews. So you can add either one, and then it's pretty short what you're asked to share. So if you look ahead, that is right there. I just pasted the whole form. So it's just a couple of different fields, you know, who's the employer, what's the job title, a little bit about that, and then a chance for you to talk a little bit about questions or certain people to share a little bit about that. And then as you do that, once we get enough for each of the different programs, you'll all start being able to view those. So I think last I checked data science, we're a little bit light on that. So hopefully we get more input on data science so that you all can have more to share from there. But there are good things in there, and please kind of pay it forward. I think it helps us all to use that well.
Definitely.
If you have any questions on that, just let us know.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's really cool is that you see certain companies like to ask a specific type of question. So you really get that prep for a specific company or for a specific role. So it's really good to pay it forward, but also definitely use this tool as you're applying to certain companies. So next, we want to talk a little bit about different types of interviews. I know Ginny's on the call today, and so I'm gonna ask her kind of at the end what she's seen. But there might be more types of interviews past the typical behavioral interview that some of you may encounter. The first is case interviewing. So for anyone interested in consulting or any type of business analytic type role, case interviews are very common nowadays. Essentially, you'll be given a business prompt and expected to analyze the situation and provide solutions. A lot of them cover a wide variety of business topics, but for example, something that we've seen is profitability or market entry. So it might be asked, we're looking to enter this new market. Can you tell us if it's profitable? So it's definitely important to practice case interviewing if you are looking into those type of industries. Technical interviews are also something that you might encounter, especially if you're a MSF or a data science student. They're essentially going to ask you a very technical question around a certain skill or product. So for finance, it might be a calculation. For data science, it might be a tool that you need to write a query for or calculate a specific cleanup. So make sure that you practice technical interviews as well. We have a great resources that will point to you that cover a wide range of topics and questions. So definitely make sure to come to us for a coaching call to access those resources or on 1220. The last is group interviewing and something more something you might see more in marketing roles, but they're essentially going to interview multiple people at the same time, and they really want to see how you communicate, how you work in a team. And so I remember one that we did at HubSpot was you and your team are making a new app. Talk about how you're going to market this or kind of push this into the market. And we basically looked at different interactions, who was more that leader, who was more that facilitator, idea generator. So it's also important to think about, if you do get a group interview, what kind of role are you going to play in that setting? Ginny, I'd love to get your insight here. Do you have kind of anything that you've seen in the past couple of years related to case or technical interviews for the MSF or marketing or data science students?
Yes, so from the MSF perspective, we actually have stock pitches that comes a lot for equity research roles. Increasingly, we're also having like presentation styles and kind of solving a case evolving around how do you do valuation of a company, and also presenting the concerns almost like a sell side merger and acquisition situation. We also have some of the technical interviews now being reoriented around restructuring topics given the state of the economy. So that what we see on the financial services side, definitely on the consulting side, full on kind of market entry and kind of management consulting topics, as well as some of the operational topics that can be seen at different kind of intersections between operations and consulting and problem solving.
Awesome, thank you. And if anyone has any questions about maybe that type of interview they haven't seen before, definitely type into chat or feel free to go off mute. But these are some of the examples of interviews you might see. So next, I'm going to pass it over to Trinity to talk a little bit about interview confidence and how to get, the right mindset before you get into an interview.
Yes. So interview confidence is like half of the game. Like part of it is definitely preparation, but the more confident you feel, the more confident you're going to appear to the person who's interviewing you. So part of kind of figuring out how to gain that confidence is just figuring out where your nerves are coming from. I would say like 95% of people going into an interview who are nervous, those nerves are just from not being very prepared and not feeling very prepared. So the more time that you're able to put towards preparing, it's going to help you a lot get over those nerves and bring a lot more into like your circle of control, because in the interview, so much is out of your control. So the more that you can bring into your control, the more confident you're going to feel and appear. And also logistics. I would say like the other 5% of people who are still very nervous about the interview, it's just about like, where do I go? Is my computer going to work? And, that type of stuff. So if you can scope those types of things out beforehand, that can be really helpful. Does anybody else have like interview confidence tips that they've found useful?
Yeah, I know for me, early in my career, when I was interviewing with a lot of different tech companies in particular, I always felt like, oh, they're trying to like stump me, they're trying to get me. And then once I started working on that industry, I realized, no, it's not about them trying to stump me or like get me. It's really just thinking about how I think critically during like a case interview. And so being on the other side as a recruiter, these folks want you to succeed in an interview. They've already invested a lot of time reviewing your application, getting you to this particular step of the interview process. Like, people are rooting for you. It may not seem like that at the time when you're getting kind of grilled with some questions, but at the end of the day, like, they invested time, they want you to succeed. And so that, for me, mentally helped me a lot going into any like bigger group interview or a case interview, just thinking like, these people want me here, like I am wanted here. And that really helped change my mindset around some of those more difficult interviews.
Go ahead, Biaha.
Oh, I was gonna say I have a really like lighthearted one. I had a super day for my HubSpot interview with 5 interviews kind of back to back, and I was really nervous for all of them, but I just pulled up my favorite music video at the time, and I just, before every interview, I just watched it, and it just got me a little bit hyped, really smiling, making sure that like I felt, very energized. And I think just that small thing made me go into it really feeling like I'll have a good interview. So do whatever you can to make sure that you're comfortable, but also something to hype you up a bit.
Awesome. And I was going to piggyback some on what Zeke said too. I think for a lot of folks, once they get the chance to be on the other side of the table, which one way you're all like, well, wait, how do I get to be in a floor? I mean, I think if you do mock interviews, even with one another, like practicing interviewing with one another, I think that's a great way to see, oh yeah, this person may not be trying to trip me up or like, no, both sides are kind of in this together. Both are trying to share information. If they didn't want to talk to you, they wouldn't extend you the interview invite. So yeah, I hope that all helps you thinking about it.
Jenny, Kathleen, anything you would like to add?
No, I love all these tips though. I think confidence, like Serenity said, is really half the battle. So
Awesome. And what Brooke said about mock interviews, that leads very well into our next topic. It was not planned, I promise, is mock interviewing. So one way to make sure you get the nerves out and make sure that you're really confident is to do mock interviews. So I highly recommend to practice before the actual interview with peers, alumni, us as the career coaches. Again, if you have an interview next week, it's always good to schedule that pretty early. And make sure to come to the mock interview with what you want to practice. I think a lot of students come in and just say, yeah, I just want to practice just, cold and blind. But I think if you, want to upskill, you definitely want to come in with maybe some specific questions like strengths, weaknesses, like that conflict question. Or maybe you can ask them to say, hey, can you be this company? Or can you give me feedback on my public speaking? Asking for that specific feedback or those specific goals will help the interviewer or the mock interviewer help you a lot better. And of course, something that I've been working on is looking at how AI tools can help you during the interview process. And so you can ask ChatGPT or other AI tools which interview questions to practice. Essentially ask that prompt. I've said, give me questions for my interview with BCG or my interview with JP Morgan, and it'll generate some really good questions for you. At this point, I would love to do a demo of a tool that I've been utilizing a lot. However, I recently found a really cool tool called Interview Warmup by Google. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll. And we only have time for one demo today. So go ahead and vote for the tool that you want to see a little bit more. They're actually pretty similar. So it's really a matter of just what has a better logo or what sounds cooler. But I'll go ahead and see which one you guys would like a demo of. And for the one that we don't get to demo today, I'll send you some information about it in the follow-up because both tools are extremely cool. It looks like we have a tight race, actually, a lot tighter than I thought. I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. Okay, and so it looks like Interview Warmup is the decision. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the PowerPoint and I'm gonna head over to Interview Warmup. So what's going to happen is one thing that's great is both tools are free. Usually will start charging in the future. So that's one thing to keep in mind of, but it is a really cool tool. Interview warmup, because it's already connected to your Google account, essentially you go into the link and it's already on the home page. From here, I can select which field I want to practice for. It is more tech leaning, so it's going to have a lot of kind of tech interview prep, but I'm going to go ahead and select general for now. And what I love about it, it's super clean, it's super user-friendly. So I'm going to go ahead and just start. It's just going to give me 5 interview questions.
Hi, let's practice an interview. Can you please tell me a bit about yourself?
Of course. So my name is Byung-Ho Lee, and my goal is to become an investment banker. I graduated from Vanderbilt University with a master's of finance, and I've had internships at Deloitte and EY for consulting. I made the pivot over so I can work in New York, and hopefully I can help companies make a lot of money. And of course,
Thanks
it's
for your
not
answer.
an actual interview. I promise I interview a lot better than that.
Describe a situation when you disagreed with someone at work. What did you do, and what was the result?
So a time where I disagreed with someone at work was when we were working on a project to create a flyer, and we had different visions about what the design should look like. What we ended up doing was we both created our design and presented it to our supervisor. Our supervisor didn't choose my design. I was really frustrated. I told my coworker, I never want to work with you again, but we made up at happy hour and now everything is great.
Got it.
All right, so there's a lot more questions that it runs through. I'm just
Tell
gonna
me
skip
about a
through.
time you made a mistake. How did you communicate that mistake?
I'm gonna go over to the end.
How would you describe your working style? Please tell me about some of your strengths and weaknesses.
So as you can see, it's going through a lot of different questions. And essentially, I'm just feeding through for the purpose of this demo. But you can see here at the end, it's going to look at your answer. And again, the algorithm isn't perfect in terms of reading the transcript. But what I really like is that some of the things that it does do, once you have a full answer, it's going to look for specific terms, it's going to look for my most used words, and it's going to look for talking points. And so what I really like about it is that it's reading through your answers and seeing how can it improve upon them. And so again, mine isn't going to be great just because I didn't actually do like a real interview, but as you're practicing and putting a lot of like finance or marketing terms, it's going to start noticing those and maybe even recommending some of those terms. So again, a really cool tool. It's free and it's a great way to practice before an actual virtual interview. Does anyone have any questions about this tool or how to use it? All right, if not, I can head back into the PowerPoint. And so next I'm going to pass it over to Brooke. Let me see through the question. I'm going to pass it over to Brooke to talk a little bit about leveraging offers and negotiating.
Great, thank you. It's cool to see that tool. I haven't tried that one yet. So one of the things that we wanted to remind you of is hopefully you've seen our pyramid here, and the different sessions that we've been doing over the summer really cover the first 8 steps, but we help with things beyond what we've been talking about. So sometimes you'll be working in your job search, internship search, and things won't go as you plan, and we can help with that. We can also help with offer negotiations, discussions, and then we also often will talk with students as they're heading into a role. And if they're having questions about how to make the most of that experience at the final level is often after you graduate, we're glad to work with you because you may be involved in hiring decisions for your company, or someone may turn to you and say, hey, can you help us find good talent? But I want to remind you, offer negotiations, that's something we're so glad if we can talk about. So we're going to give the quick on this today. But in the next slide, these are some things I would start thinking about now if I were you. So the first question I would think about is how and when do you prepare for negotiations? And really the right time, I think, to really start thinking a lot about that is when you start heading into, or you're landing final round interviews. When you're heading into final round interviews, there's a pretty good chance that an offer could be coming. And I think it's a good time to start thinking about how interested am I in that position? How interested would I be in working with that company? And then what are some of the other employers that I'm currently speaking with, and how far into the process am I with them? May also want to think about some things like what's your personal budget looking like? Are the salaries, or what you know about the salaries, are they kind of lining up with what you're going to need to do? So it's a good time to start thinking about some of those questions. The next bullet point I have is negotiate what? And I'll say, I think a lot of times when students come to us and they say, oh, I want to talk about negotiation, I think one of the first things you want to think about before you think about negotiating a package, a compensation package, or something an employer brings to you, the first thing that you could really start thinking about negotiating is the deadline for the offer. So most times when employers extend an offer, they'll say, hey, we'd like to hear back from you within a week or 2 weeks. Usually in the formal offer letter, there'll be a date when they want to know. And oftentimes that can work well, but sometimes it doesn't give you enough time. And you can definitely ask that employer for more time. We'd say on average, like 2 to 3 weeks is probably what's most common, but I have known students who've asked and sometimes received far more than that. So again, it's a good thing to be thinking about that if you're feeling pressure to make a decision. I will say there are places like investment banking where there is often not quite as much flexibility on that, but still there's often some room for talking with them about it. The next last bullet point on this slide is negotiate when. And I'd say when you really get into negotiating the compensation package they give you, you want to make sure that you aren't getting into that until you receive the offer, and usually until you receive the written offer. So just some things to think about that. And I'll say, like, one key takeaway I think from this slide is with recruiting, things really change once you have one offer. I think the whole game changes, the whole kind of way you're thinking about approaching it changes. And we're so glad if we can help you, just provide like another viewpoint or some perspective, or kind of brainstorm and think things through with you. One other thing I want to talk through on the next slide is, I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but thinking a little bit about leveraging offers. So in short, one of the ways that things can really change is once you have received a first offer, and hopefully you've been kind of thinking as you were approaching that final round interview, and you may be thinking and saying, you know what, I'm pretty excited about this company, but there's another employer I'm really talking with that I'm also interested in. And maybe hopefully you've had at least like an interview, some interaction with them. But if they haven't given you an offer and you're curious to see if you can finish recruiting with that other company first, you may want to think about trying to letting that company that you don't have an offer from know that you do have an offer from another company, to see if that other company can wrap up their recruiting in time that you can have sort of 2 offers in hand and sort of compare them and make a decision based on that. This lays out some of the different ways that can go, but I will say, it really, leveraging offers can definitely differ from one situation to the next. And that's when that happens to you, please come and let us know if we can help at all. We're so glad to kind of talk it through with you. I will say it can be stressful. I know getting ready for an interview can be stressful, but it can be stressful when you've got a company, especially like some of the investment banks really like to put a little pressure on, or they'll call you every day, like, oh, have you made a decision on the offer? What are your questions? What can we help you with? It can feel like a lot. But hopefully, we're here to help support you with that and help to make sure you kind of think things through as you're thinking about possibly leveraging an offer. If we move forward, the last point I want to make about offers and negotiating is, with things like offers, it can be difficult because it can sometimes feel like there's this imbalance. The employer has all this information and you may feel like you don't have a lot of information about salaries and what you can be paid and what you're worth. And I will say that is another place that I think we can definitely be of help. So we were talking earlier about the tools you're going to get access to in 1220, and start of August, you're going to access to the research tools, which includes the interview database and this tool, which is the salary database. And this is really helpful because you can look and use this to get a sense of what salaries look like for students at Vanderbilt, ON, and data science, just by doing some sorting on this. I will say you can't pull information for a specific employer usually, but you can often pull things like here we're looking by function. You can often look by industry and location. So there's a lot of different ways you can sort the data, and it can be pretty helpful. And if you move forward, There's also a lot of other good information that's out there. If you haven't checked it out yet, for the MSF and for the Master's of Marketing program, we have the employment reports. So please check that out. For data science, we don't have one of those yet, but if you check on the website, there's also some good information there. You can see to the right. And that information is publicly available. And I will say sometimes we share that with employers, because employers sometimes, may not have done a lot of hiring for, master's level students for these roles, and they may want to know what the going rate is or what we're seeing. So hopefully that can be of help. And then in the next slide, we'll see a couple of other tools. I'm just curious if anybody in the chat has used either of these or is familiar with either of these, if they've been of help to you. Let me know, or I'll say too in the chat, if you have another external tool that you really like, please drop that in the chat too. I'd be curious to see what other people say on this. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Zeke. Yes, that's that's the MMark employment report. So a great thing to check. So the one on the right is the Department of Labor through the Bureau of Labor Statistics has tons of great information. A lot of it's available, and we're talking pretty good level, pretty good quality data because it's coming from the US government. It's not just self-reported. So that's one place to look, for example. Another place that you can look, this is probably especially helpful if you are on a student visa, is if you're an employer and you hire somebody on an H-1B visa, you need to report to the government a couple of key pieces of information, which include the name of the employer, the job title, and the salary. Location as well. And you can sort through that. You can sort through it through the government website, or this is one of my favorite there's several websites like My Visa Jobs. This one is H-1B Data Info, but you can use that to get a sense of, this one will give you, specific name of the company and job title and how much that person is making. So for students that are international on an F1 visa, this is also a great way to see, the age-old question of which companies sponsor. So that's another great resource. And then last, one more resource on this, Glassdoor is another website. There are other websites like this, but Glassdoor is one of the sites that compiles self-reporting. People can go in and report, hey, I got an offer from American Airlines in marketing. Here's what my offer was, and it does a nice job of plotting that out. So, I mean, that to say, I think the main takeaway from these slides is please remember there's tons of great data that you can arm yourself with. And I think that's one of the main things when I'm talking with students about kind of strategy for negotiating is take data. So you're not just kind of, throwing out numbers and saying, I think I should get this. I think I can get that. You can use data to actually back up what you're saying. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Of course. Thanks so much, Brooke. And I know, we talked a little bit about dates and compensation. There's a lot more that you can negotiate. I think during COVID, I negotiated a work from home equipment stipend. So making sure that I can get like Wi-Fi or get like maybe another mouse, for example. So there's a lot of other things you can negotiate in addition to pay and start date and things like that. So now we're going to head into our activity, and this is where our pre-assignment comes into play. What question did you struggle with the most? We're going to randomly assign you into breakout rooms with a partner, and I want you to go ahead and ask your partner what question they struggle with the most in an interview. Take a minute to gather your thoughts and the star story you want for that specific question. One person is going to be the interviewer, the other is the interviewee. Just go ahead and flip back and forth and answer the question and get some practice in. And then the other person hopefully will provide some feedback on what they think. And then we'll come back and reconvene in about 6 to 8 minutes. We'll broadcast that. But I'm going to go ahead and create breakout rooms now. But if anyone has any questions about the activity, please let me know. Okay.
I'll say on this, I hope you all can come up with a good question you struggle with, because it's a great place to practice. If you can't, I think one of the questions we see students struggle with the most is just the tell me about yourself question. It can be a great way to get to know someone else from the incoming class, but just practicing that question and thinking about how it relates to the jobs that you want to pursue. That can be a great one to practice if you're stuck.
Okay, so I'm going to put everyone in a breakout room. But yeah, if anyone has no other questions, please go ahead and join the breakout room. And I will pause Zoom the recording. All right, so I definitely want to hear everyone's impression, how that went. If you want to put in the chat, did anything surprise you? Do you have the same question that you both struggle with? Feel free to go off mute as well if you want to talk a bit about how that experience went.
I guess I'll come off mute and share my experience. I was paired with Taylor. We had a nice chat. I think the same question that we both find rather difficult was the what is your weakness question. And we both agreed that the struggle lies in finding something that is authentic. It is a weakness, but at the same time, it should be like something that has a positive spin on it. So it's not like you're doomed and you cannot work for this company. So you have to find something. And for me, I used to say this in interviews that I tend to be a bit too much of a perfectionist sometimes and too detail oriented, which can get in the way of meeting the deadlines. That was something that I said. And Taylor also had a good one. I'll say it for her. Her answer usually was that like she did athletics in her undergrad. So there she was taught that, your success speaks for you. So you shouldn't be like talking about yourself too much because that's considered bragging. And that makes it difficult for her to talk about herself more when it's necessary. So that was her answer. So that was a very informative chat that we had. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Miriam. And something that I always like to tell people is that, don't focus too much on like the positive spin on it. I think people can kind of see through that sometimes. So focus more on the growth or the learning element. I would say it's okay to admit like, I didn't do well on this, or I'm not great at this, but I'm learning at it. And here's what I'm doing to take the steps to do that. So definitely focus more on the growth, but I think both of your answers are great. And I would love to continue working on them. And I know all of the coaches would as well. Does anyone else want to share either in the chat or off mute about their practice with this activity? We'll get one more person's feedback. I'll go ahead and call on Reese. Reese, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
It was good. So I had a similar interview question I struggle with. I also was thinking the strengths and weaknesses because it can be so hard to talk about yourself in that way. And it's so funny because I also said that I can struggle with being a perfectionist, and I don't want to sound like I feel like that's can be kind of like an easy answer because then you can spin it. And so we actually talked also about turning it into more of a growth thing. So that was really good. And then my partner talked about having the question of how you work in groups basically. And that was really good too, because he brought that up and I was like, oh, wait, that's a great question. I always forget about that one. And that can be a hard one to just pull from. So we talked about having maybe some questions like how we had kind of talked about, where you have specific examples that you can go to without really having to think about it because you already have them prepared.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. I definitely agree. Having those examples ready to go, and especially if they're adaptable to multiple scenarios, I think is great. So thank you so much everyone for participating in that. Hopefully you got to practice and also learn a little bit. That kind of wrap things up. I think just a summary of what we talked about, preparing for your interview is going to be key, whether it's those common questions, the different types of interviews, as well as using AI tools for mock interviews. It's going to help you build your confidence and reduce anxiety. I think another thing that's important is that it is okay to be nervous. I work a lot with the undergrad students as well. And if someone's not nervous, I get really worried because it kind of means that you don't care. So it means that you care if you're nervous, but don't let it stop you from really kind of showing your great experiences and your great goals. And you have a lot of support here with the coaches, alumni, peers. They're all willing to help you with interview prep because they want you to succeed. I think everyone in this process really does want you to succeed. So don't feel like you can't go to anybody. But that wrapped things up. And thank you so much for graduating from our SM Summer Prep session. I'll let Brooke talk a little bit about next week for the employer relations and recruiting overview. Brooke, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, I dropped in the chat. That is the link for registering for next Thursday. So that one is going to be a little bit different from what we've been doing because it's going to be with the employer relations team in our office, not we're all on the coaching side. We work mostly with students, they work with employers, but they also do a ton with the 1220 system. We talked a little bit about how you're going to get access to the research tools. You're also going to get access to jobs and being able to start applying for jobs there. So there's a ton in the system. The more you can get familiar with it, the more it's going to help you coming up. So yeah, so we hope that you can join us for that.
Awesome. And then just to wrap things up, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone that's been part of not just this session, but multiple sessions, kind of looking at your journey in a holistic view. And also for those watching the recording, you've gone through a lot. You've gone through our explore sessions, kind of thinking about what career you want to look at. You've gone through our planning sessions around how to think about your story and prepare those professional documents, connecting those key pieces to networking and employers. And then, of course, wrapping things up and succeeding through cover letters and interviewing. So take a moment to reflect on how important some of these topics have been and how you can use this information as you head into Owen. We'll be sharing this document in the future. And so feel free to take a look at any of our previous recordings on these topics if you missed one. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to launch a poll. This is our first year that we've done the Specialized Master Summer Prep series. So we'd love to get some feedback on how would you have liked to known or heard about these sessions, learn more about them, really make sure that everyone is aware. Is there anything that you would have liked to see more for next year? Okay. Email looks like a popular vote. And you can vote multiple options. You don't have to select just one. So this is going to be super helpful for us when we think about next year, kind of building up even more. So we definitely want to get everyone's feedback. We know there's about 16 of, sorry, not 16 of you. I think there's actually about 12. So I think everyone has responded for the most part. But I'll go ahead and end the poll there. Brooke, if you want to go ahead and screenshot that, I think that's going to be super helpful. Okay. And then just to wrap things up, I'd love to get some feedback verbally as well. So for anyone that wants to go off mute or put in the chat, what did you enjoy about these sessions? What didn't you enjoy? What was missing? I'd love for people to kind of tell us what their experience was like, maybe at a specific session or looking at it holistically. And we won't end the session until people give feedback, so holding you hostage.
Something I really liked about the sessions was it was a good way to kind of get us thinking about all these things that we need to be prepared for coming into Owen, just kind of jumpstart that career exploration or interview prep, cover letter, whatever it may be. I thought it was a good way to really start to think about it. And then I also liked it. It was a way to meet people and before coming into Owen. So I really enjoyed all my conversations I've had in all the small groups.
That's awesome. We hope to do more activities if you really enjoyed it, because it is a great way to meet people. Thank you so much for that.
I agree. It was nice that you were able to see faces and meet people too through this. I think something that could have been better is just if you promoted this through admissions when people are applying and stuff. For me, I was between two schools making my decision, and not that I think a session like this would be a deal breaker, but you also can definitely weigh in on somebody's decision to come to Owen or go somewhere else. And also, there's no way for you not to know about the summer sessions if you're promoting through admissions. So I think that'll be a good thing to do.
Absolutely. That's something that's been top of our list. So thank you so much, Dan, for that. And still thinking about the previous questions, but we also want to take a look, and you've already kind of mentioned this, but do you feel prepared heading into your specialized master's program? And is there anything you would like to see change next year? Maybe a topic that we didn't cover, or something that you really want to look into more in the future? Let's get a couple more people for these.
I definitely feel prepared. I think also the other thing this indirectly helped with was just me holding me accountable to doing things over the summer and just come in with a head start. Like I've been like this kind of motivated me to go out of my way and start reaching out to people and networking on LinkedIn. I've had like so many conversations with different people. So like that, I feel a lot more confident and more prepared. And this was kind of a catalyst, if you will, into me doing things over the summer and holding me accountable and all that. So thank you.
Definitely. And, you know, as you start meeting more people at Owen, they might ask you like, hey, have you networked? And you're already going to be way ahead of them. So no, that's great to hear. And it's great that you'll be the experts heading into Owen. Let's just get one more person.
I'll add on that. It's one of the I've never had a program like that before. I've never gone through a program like this before, and it's the value of it is in actually really breaking up this topic into different stages and going deeper in each one of them. Because like if you say networking, it sounds like, of course, everyone knows networking is important and everyone knows how to network probably, but that's not true actually. And like this course kind of took it on the like scientific level, like you dissected the parts of networking and the process of getting a job in scientific ways, like how to approach it. And it's very targeted and result oriented and very helpful. And that's what I loved about it, because it's not just general TED Talks, you know, it's just really specific. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. And one thing that we really try to consider was things like our really diverse populations, you know, international students from all over the world. So hopefully that was helpful. Just again, that breakdown of these topics, not assuming that everyone knows. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, especially for international students, because like this can be very different from their cultures. I'm an international student myself, so it prepares you for American ways of doing things. So that's very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, this is not going to be our last conversation around these topics. If anyone wants to continue, please feel free to reach out to any of the coaches. We'd love to talk to you. But that wraps up our session for today. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you all. So good to see you.